Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Space Nomad, and back to my series of reviewing space books. Today I'll be reviewing this book called The Chinese Space Program in the Public Conversation About Space, written by researcher Andrew Thomas, who has expertise in space, in China and space. The book talks about how the West views the Chinese space program and how they can learn a thing or two or improve and change their viewpoint in how they view China. Obviously, we know when the space race began in the 50s, around the Cold War. You had two different ideologies that were competing: the communist ideology and the capitalist ideology. And in the late 40s, 1949, you had the Communist Revolution in China with Mao Zedong, which obviously made the US be more suspicious of China, considering that it has similar ideology, or at least what they believe, similar ideology to the USSR. And this has also shaped a lot in how the US viewed China, and in some cases maybe still views China. What this book is basically trying to explain is that a lot of the views that Western nations have about Chinese space program might be not up to date, actually. Obviously, the time when China started their space program in the 50s, China was nowhere near where they are now. Today we know China is the second biggest economy in the world, and potentially maybe even the second or third strongest military in the world. But back then in the 50s, those things were not the case, and Western nations would look at China as obviously inferior in the way of when it comes to economics, space, technology, advancement, etc., etc. And when China in the early 50s tried to start their own space program, the West would also look to China in a way that China was not basically prioritizing what's important for the country. Like how you often hear, why invest in space when you have poverty in country, whatever, in this case you want to call it country A. So that's the mentality that the West had about China in the 50s when they started their own space program. They would say, why is China wasting money on space when their population is very poor? And obviously we know, especially as people with space background, the benefits of space and how that actually can accelerate and advance the economies and innovation of a country. So with starting from that position and also being considered like less of a developed country than at that time the USSR and the US, China was basically not considered up to par to those two, and even less so by the US, especially after the US succeeded in their landing man on the moon, the Apollo program. But then something major happened in China, and in the early 80s we had Deng Xiaoping, who changed the country, who opened the country, and made it more possible for private companies to exist, but also for Westerners to collaborate or start their own venture and work with China. And that opened a lot of development and a lot of brought a lot of innovation technologies to China, and also obviously brought a lot of competition for Western nations in terms of manufacturing in other parts of the industry as we know it. And this caused for China to actually, because they were also already being seen as an underdog, to accelerate even more. And they were doing also, just like any other country, they were doing a lot of space advocacy and having a lot of space competitions and things like that. That also was done in Western nations, and educating the population, especially the young people, and just generally everyone. In the beginning, it was mostly targeted at the older generation, but later on, especially as China became more and more open country in terms of like economies, every other country that went to space before China understood the importance of youth. So China also started to understand the importance of its youth. And there's a good example in this book where they mention, where the author mentions about a small satellite company where a lot of the young people, a lot of the people at 2014, they did a survey. A lot of the people were born late 70s, after late 70s, early 80s. And we know what happened early 80s. That's when Deng Xiaoping changed the country and made it more open. So, and obviously in the recent years, in the early 2000s, with space becoming more and more privatized and like more accessible, more and more young people started to get involved in space. Just like in the US, when you had SpaceX showing up, there was excitement again for space, just like how there was excitement for space in the early 60s. So we know that there was a time where, like after the Apollo program and after the Columbia and Challenger accidents or unfortunate accidents, interest for space was waning, was going down, especially in the US also because their main rival at that time in the early 90s fell apart, and the USSR fell apart, and it became multiple countries, Russia and all the other ex-Soviet Union countries. So the interest in space became less and less. But with private space, the interest in space rose up again. And this also actually happened in China, where you see that nowadays more and more young people are actually interested in space, want to get involved with space. And also bring that what's it called, national pride achievement to their country, just like how other people, especially other people, engineers, scientists from other countries want to do it for their country. So what this book is mainly talking about is changing the Western view about how they viewed the Chinese space program, and understand that, especially for a big nation like China, that space is just as a necessity as it is for the US, and to advance the country, to bring innovation, to tackle a lot of the challenges facing the country, just like how Western nations have managed to tackle some of their challenges and bring about innovation and new technologies that we have nowadays, like the internet and all the things that we have that are actually thanks to space technologies. So this is what this book was mainly talking about. If you guys have any other further questions, please feel free to reach out in regards to this book, and I'll be more than happy to answer what I can answer. Potentially I'll be interested also to see any Chinese space experts or people working in the Chinese space program to have a discussion about China space, especially human space program, and also the Chinese private space industry. But yes, this is the book that I reviewed for today. I'll be reviewing more books, and stay tuned. Please follow, subscribe, and all of that. And I will keep you guys updated with new other books that I read. Thank you very much.